So we're going to talk about what you can do to prepare for the pending recession. So no matter where you are, you should be doing two things at once. The first one is maintaining and just stabilizing everything that you have. And the second thing is, which a lot of you might not be able to think about right now because of everything that's happening, is to figure out how you can actually grow and actually benefit from what is going to happen next. So the first one, which might seem obvious, is that you're going to need some cash reserves. I've been talking about this on the channel forever. Now, how can you do that? How can you do that now when everything's going up and it feels like all the forces are actually going against you? So the first thing to do is to look at your operating expenses. Now, if you haven't done that, you need to take a look at that. What are your habits? What are you spending them on? And more importantly, what checks are you writing right now that are the most important for you, and which ones can you cut back on? Specifically, credit card debt is killing people. It's set up for you to lose. You cannot pay over 20% interest on a credit card and expect to get ahead. Most people are just paying the basics and not even touching the principles. That basically means you're going backwards negatively and you're just paying someone else 20% on the use of their money. So back in 2008, 9, and 10, when everything imploded, I went through that. And one of the strategies that we had, my partner and I, Ross, was to have extra capital on the sidelines. So we were able to capitalize on assets at 40, 50% of what they sold for just a few years prior. So just imagine what was going on in 2008, 2009. People were giving their houses back to banks because the loans were actually more than the value of the house. So who has the problem in that scenario? The bank. The bank had the problem. The bank's going to have the problem now. So you got to be thinking like the bank. The bank's going to be getting all this toxic real estate back, and they don't want to own real estate. That's not the point of a bank. They want to lend against it. So the bank is going to be taking massive write-offs just like they did in 2008, 9, and 10. Your job is to solve the problem for the banks. So I remember specifically when the banks were taking back properties, the last thing that they're doing is lending or even investing. Because of course, when you're taking water in your own boat and you're sinking, you're not thinking about growing. So at the same time, we recognize that Canada, their economy was booming and our dollar was following. So the Canadian dollar and the US dollar were par, which means that they were almost equal. And that hasn't really happened historically. So everything from a Canadian standpoint was on sale. So the Canadians were looking at the US as an opportunity to buy because one, the values of real estate had plummeted, but two, the value of their dollar was equal. So they were getting two bites of the apple. They were getting a good deal on the real estate itself, and they were able to use their own money in Canadian funds, which was par, taking that discount that they normally had with the exchange rate. So what Ross and I did is we went up to Canada and we partnered with a bunch of folks up there, and we put together a couple funds of $100 million tranches each, and we started buying toxic real estate from banks in areas like Texas, Oklahoma, and Nevada. And that is actually how we were able to buy assets in 09, 10, 11, and 12. While everybody else was pulling back, we just went to a different country and brought that money down to the US and started buying. It's important to understand that there's always unique opportunities like that at your feet. You just have to think out of the box and look at the situation and solve somebody else's problem, because somebody has the money to buy everything. There will be opportunities like this in upcoming years. So if you have a job currently, or even a rental, or you're a renter, do not take your landlord or your renter or your employer for granted. This is the time to have a stable situation with all of those things. So if you have a renter, the best thing you can do is not raise their rent and try to keep them there long term, because they are probably struggling too. if we're going into this global recession, then unemployment is going to go up, and you're going to be faced with wanting the very best renters that have the very best jobs, and they're going to stay in the very best places with the people that they trust. If I had a job and I was trying to preserve my situation, I would first go to my direct report and I would ask them, is there anything else I can do in any other area of the company? Because what you want to do is you want to have multiple skills in multiple areas. So maybe that's accounting, maybe that's marketing, maybe that's in IT, maybe that's in HR, whatever it might be. You're going to want to make sure that everyone knows you have the willingness to work anywhere in the company. I've had numerous situations where we've had an accountant leave, for example, or somebody in HR leave, and we're able to flip-flop those people because we have one person that has skills in both areas. So as people come and go, and especially as companies start to pull back as well, because don't forget, companies are also experiencing the same thing that you might be experiencing from inflation and high interest rates and all of those things as well. So they're also looking at their own individual profitability. And so you don't want to be a product of any potential cuts that might come as a result. If you are doing multiple things for the company, you're going to be more valuable than the one person who only does one thing. So one of the things I always look for in an employee is, do they make me money or do they lose me money? So a lot of times employees don't think about this, and maybe you don't even care, but I can assure you the employer cares. So if you're in a position where you're actually making the company money, then I can assure you you're going to be on the list of do not cut, as opposed to maybe one that's just overhead where they're actually trying to reduce their expenses. So another thing is, things can get kind of negative. So it's important that you keep a positive attitude and a positive mindset. I can assure you that that's going to pay off later. I always hire for attitude, because people with really good attitudes, they'll say, I'll do anything at any time for anybody for however long I need to. And that's actually what an employer wants. They want somebody with an open mind that says, just put me in, coach. I'll do whatever I need. If I was younger or even in college, the last thing I would do is take on additional student debt. One of the things that you need to look at is, does that debt actually pay you back? What does that extra class or that extra year or even that PhD actually get you financially? I know you've been sold a bill of goods, and I'm sure that you have in your mind that you need to do this, but that's something that you can control. Will this extra education actually pay off for me later? There's a reason that there's over $1 trillion of student debt right now out in the US, and that's because the school is a business. You are their customer, and each time they get you to re-up or get another degree, that's just more income for them. I'm not saying in all cases that's a bad deal. What I'm telling you, however, is, and you racking up more debt, that's not the right thing to be doing right now. And instead, take a look at forward learning skills, whatever those might be. They might be seminars, they might be books, they might be YouTube, they might be coaches, they might be mentors. They might just be people that you know that can give you some good direction. But it's most important that you have an open mind when you're listening to them. Because if you're on a track and you're super fixated on that track, you're not going to listen anyway. And I think a lot of you need to step back and take a look at which industries are growing and which ones are contracting. Which ones are contracting or which ones are oversaturated. You got to take a look at the industry as a whole, because a lot of industries are actually being taken over by things like AI and ChatGPT, as an example. Things that you might want to consider are things like pilots and trade schools, where we're seeing salaries go like this because there just aren't that many people going into that sector. AI, ChatGPT obviously are growing like crazy. Then, of course, the medical field is going to continue to grow with the aging baby boomers. So the next step is, of course, how do you preserve your wealth during this period of time? When the government is just going to continue to print money and just spend and spend and spend, what's going to happen to you if you're a saver? So you want to own things that are inflation hedges, like hard assets, whatever that is. So think about art, think about cars that go up in value, not brand new ones. Think about real estate that's going to be inflationary hedges, because obviously as inflation hits, the real estate prices are going to continue to go up, especially now because we're in such a supply shortage. think about gold and silver. While I don't think of gold and silver as a direct investment, I think of it more as a hedge against the US dollar, because more and more countries are frustrated with the US dollar. And of course, the government doesn't look like they're going to stop printing anytime soon. So what you want to do is what we've done is you want to lock in all this fixed rate debt at the lowest prices you can, which you'll hedge inflation over the long term. Because as things inflate, and all you got to do is look at the dollar and what it's done over the last 50 years, you'll see that inflation erodes debt over a long period of time. So why not you? Why shouldn't you get in good debt just like everyone else and let the economy inflate it away over a period of time? So there's definitely going to be a lot of opportunities coming, that's for sure. So you need the resources and the skill set and the right people around that are identifying those kinds of things so that you can strike when the iron's hot. And one that I keep talking about, and hopefully some of you guys are doing this, is you have to have multiple side hustles. As you might know, I have at least 10 different sources of income coming in from all different places. That was because I wanted diversification. Sometimes they're going really well and sometimes they're not, but the last thing you want is a single point of failure. And if that for you is a salary, then you're in the worst position ever. In my opinion, that is the worst position ever. You do not want a single point of failure for your income, because if that income stops for whatever reason, then you're in the worst position available. What you need to do is have multiple sources of income, multiple side hustles, and they're everywhere. Just go on the internet and start something and go find another source of income. You don't have to quit your job. Just make sure that you have multiple buckets of money coming in at all times. The reason I think that crisis equals opportunity is because nobody really gets very smart when the economy goes up and makes everybody look great, just like we went through. And when there's disruption in anything, it doesn't really even matter whether it's a business, whether it's in real estate, it doesn't matter. When there's disruption, that's when the smart folks go in and they go pick up the pieces, they put them back together, and they create value. So that's actually what everyone is waiting for. All the big money on the sidelines is waiting for disruption, because all we're trying to do is solve somebody else's problem. If you want to see the 3 lessons that every investor needs to know by the age of 35, click on the video now.